Those Obama-era deportation statistics we mentioned come with a bit of a wrinkle. They include those captured at or near the border, something no previous administration counted as a deportation. Elaine, Trump points instead to a 70% decline from 2009 to 2015 in deportations of immigrants found more than 100 miles from the border as evidence that current laws are not being enforced.
Important context there. Major, it's interesting. This issue of illegal immigration has long been sort of a third rail almost for those who have tried to tackle this. It's certainly been an issue that has derailed some politicians who've tried to tackle this. How much room does Donald Trump actually have to maneuver at all on this issue?
Well, you raise a very important point, Elaine, and immigration has not necessarily been a third rail unless you get really close to it, which is exactly what a third rail is. If you get too close to it, it can be fatal. And in the case of one of Donald Trump's long-lost Republican rivals, Marco Rubio, that's exactly what happened. He came to Washington after running for the Senate in Florida and winning as a Tea Party darling, if you will. And he came to Washington and said, I'm going to roll up my sleeves and get heavily involved in the legislative details of immigration. And the deeper he got into the legislative details and the more he tried to work out a bipartisan compromise, the greater distance he created between himself, his original campaign rhetoric, and many of the Tea Party conservatives who originally supported him. And that's the process that has afflicted many Republicans who have gotten close to the immigration issue. If you stay away from it and make big, bold pronouncements about walls or tough border security and deportations and following the rule of law, without getting into the underlying details, you can be, as Trump has proven, ultimately successful. And what Trump is discovering now is all the derision that he heaped on Rubio, Jeb Bush, Lindsey Graham, and others in the Republican primaries who said your big, bold pronouncements cannot exist in actual policy. He said you're weak, you're not strong enough, you have no sense of what the country wants, and you have no sense of how to lead. Now Trump is discovering these underlying details are very difficult, hard to work out, and there's a political risk to sounding too harsh on immigration among certain Republican constituencies, particularly those who live in the suburbs, most of them women, but not all. So as Trump tries to refashion the politics of it, he's actually getting closer to the underlying details, and he's learning the hard way this is a very hard issue to do something with in terms of practicality and leadership, but it's an easy issue to demagogue.
So I think you just answered my next question here, but in terms of messaging, how challenging then would it be for Donald Trump to reposition himself, at least even with the rhetoric on immigration this late in the race? Because as you well know, for some people, any kind of talk of a legal path to legalization smacks of amnesty. And that is something that some conservatives are absolute about.
Right. If it were a Nathaniel Hawthorne album, Nathaniel Hawthorne short story, it would be The Scarlet Letter. It would be A, not for adultery, but A, for amnesty. And that, in some conservative circles, is an absolute disqualifier. And you saw over the weekend, and even before that, Sarah Palin and others who are very vocal and visible on the immigration issue on the very, very conservative side, warning Trump, listen, you really are playing with fire here, because we in this community of conservative Republicans have heard from all these politicians about the complexities. We don't care about the complexities. We want you to enforce the law. If that means deporting people, so be it. They broke the law. End of story. And now Trump is looking much more mushy on that central question. So my guess is, and all the reporting I've done talking to those within the Trump campaign and those around it, is that Wednesday in Phoenix at this speech, which Trump describes as a big one, we'll see, Trump will talk about a lot of other things and prioritize the creation of a wall on the U.S.-Mexico border, interior enforcement. He will criticize the Obama administration approach to immigration and Hillary Clinton's. And then he may get a little bit to the deportation, but he'll prioritize all these other things first. Say there are bigger priorities, I'll deal with them, plus you don't want Hillary's immigration policy. Oh, deportations, don't worry about that. We'll deal with that later, and try to push it off both as a matter of policy and a matter of rhetoric. We will see if that's enough. But he's got quite a record he's got to deal with, and quite a number of statements that can be fed right back to him if his critics so desire.
Absolutely. I'm sure people will be parsing his every word during that speech. All right, Major Garrett, thank you so much.
Sure.